Hi and welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board games. I did find a hat, a historical hat. Kind of Che Guevara was still alive up until 67, and we're covering 65, 66. So it is era appropriate. Thanks for joining us for that second episode of Wargame Archaeology by amazing idea by Liz from Beyond Solitaire. And the idea was, let's look back at the origins of tabletop, commercial tabletop wargaming. Of course, wargaming had existed before. This is not a history class, but looking back at the beginning of our hobby as a hobby. And the idea that you had was, let's look back at the general magazine from Avalon Hill. And let's go volume through volume and read all of those and look back and see, okay, what has changed, what is still relevant today, and just discuss a bit how the UV evolved or maybe not evolved that much. And if you're interested in this, the first episode was hosted on Beyond Solitaire's channel, so you can find it over there. And this is the episode 2 where we go through volume 2, and volume 2 is covering 65, 66. So the 6 volumes from that period, because they're released every other month. And I would like to thank everyone for joining us. I see that there is already quite a few of you here. How are you doing, Liz?
I'm doing good. I'm very excited to talk about this. I am. Yes, we are late. It's because we get distracted talking to each other
Yeah,
before we
yeah.
talk to you. But also, just Freddie, you should link the like we have a board game geek thread where we're putting these. So if you want to see all the ones that we did, we're hoping to do more in the future. So, we've got like a little central spot for these two.
Yeah, and just to say, we are actually not only planning on looking at the old Avalon Hill magazines. We might actually explore other magazines further down the line. We'll keep a chronological order, but we're also considering, and we'll talk a bit about this at the end of this episode, to go beyond just looking at magazines, but also playing specific games from that period of time, but also to also look at how game-wise things have kind of evolved. So this is something that might grow from that. And Alexandre was saying that we're late because I was making Cardi B jokes. So for those of you who don't know, you can go and check on my Twitter account. There is this moment in an interview that she was doing. So like the format is, what is it called, hot wings, or I don't know, when they are eating hot
Hot
wings.
ones. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
hot ones. Yeah. And in the interview, she talks about her fascination for FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt, and her interest in World War II in general. And it's really super interesting. And there was a bit of a debate on Homo Ludens Discord server around, is she more of a hex encounter player or more of a CDG player? And I was making the argument that I think that Cardi B is more of a CDG player. And if Cardi B is listening to us, which is probably the case, it would be awesome to have her on the show to play a game of Churchill. So putting it out there, I would love to have her on the show. That would be pretty awesome. Anyway, back to the topic of today. Wait a minute. Let me go back here. And so I prepared a small slide deck, and that's basically what we did last time. So Liz and I both read the volumes separately, and then we took some screenshots. And Liz, you sent me quite a few screenshots, and I tried to organize them in a like, I don't know, rational way, in a way, or I try to regroup them by theme, and
Yeah.
we look through it. Good. Oh, and Patrick is here. Hey, Patrick,
Yay.
thanks for being here. It's really nice to have you with us. Great. Next. Okay. What I wanted to say. So, okay, let's start. And maybe there is one thing that I wanted to highlight, and that's from the first. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna close my window here. There is a bit of noise. That's the first page of the first issue of the second volume, and it reminded me of Kevin Bertram from Fort Circle Games, which is someone that is known in the industry for being very transparent about the business side of things of publishing, where he gives a lot of details around how does it work, what's his margin, his relationship with content creators, why he sends review copy and why he thinks it matters and everything. So someone who's very, very transparent and very, very professional in his approach. And when I saw this, It's actually a two-part article where the first part was at the end of the first volume, and this is the second part, where actually Avalon Hill people talk about the behind the scenes of publishing. And in that part, they really talk about like really making the money. So how do they promote the games? How do they like there are trade promotions for people who are subscribed to their mailing list, how they use direct mail and everything. And I felt like it was so unusual, but at the same time so mature to talk about the business side of things. I was really surprised. I don't know if you thought anything when you fell on that on the first page. It's not really attractive. Of course, they're talking about Squander, which is a game that they're promoting, but promoting it by talking about the pure business side of things was really a surprise to me.
Yeah, actually, that's not what I noticed about this article. What I thought was really interesting about this one was that did Fred disappear?
No, I'm here.
Oh no,
I just
am I running?
highlighted.
Okay,
No,
phew.
no, no. I just highlighted you for to make it more dynamic, and
I
because
got you.
I was
I
gonna
was
drink
like,
some
ooh, did
coffee.
I steal Fred's? This is
Oh,
this
that's
is
fine.
how the coup starts, Fred. No,
I'm still everything is still under control.
don't listen to him, everyone. So what I actually noticed in that article was a little bit lower down. One thing that was kind of cool is that they talked about how the game was better than Monopoly, which is hilarious because it feels like we've all just been dunking on Monopoly.
Yeah, for 60
But
years.
also,
Yeah.
I think it gave a sense of their ambition at the time that like they wanted to have a very mainstream product in addition to doing war games. And so we kind of see war games as like a niche thing, and like that theme is going to come up again, I think later in the slides. But what's really interesting about it to me is that you can see how they see themselves fitting into the gaming industry, and it's not necessarily as a niche publisher. They have larger ambitions. They're thinking about larger toy fairs. They're thinking about games that are not just historical games. And I just thought that was a very interesting thing. Like, how did Avalon Hill understand itself at that time, as opposed to like what we see when we look back and what we remember it for?
And I think that's a really interesting point that you're making, because it really shines through what they released and the way they talk about themselves. They really have this ambition of providing better board games. Like they are like, oh, it's the 60s now. We are in the future. We cannot play with those old games from the beginning of the 20th century. That's boring. We're going to propose something new. And they were, in their sense, they were, and I think they were right, they were creating a new era of board gaming and something that we're thriving upon now, but they were really starting something new. And they saw they were doing like heavy strategic games. The fact that some of them were war games was just a side effect of that. They had a focus on military history, but they were thinking about bigger things than this. In a lot of ways, it remind me of like I don't know if you look at Capstone, for example, games. Like if Capstone made a bit more war games, that would be exactly the same category, like really well made strategic game and everything. And it's quite funny that it wasn't so strict a distinction for them. It's just that they liked war games, but they saw it as a sub genre of heavy strategic game. Have you played Squander, Liz?
No, I've not. I've played Republic of Rome. That's my Avalon Hill experience. Although
Yeah.
we'll talk about it later. But my new treasure arrived in the mail.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk
I'm
about it
very
at the
excited.
end.
Yeah.
And I will complain about Niels. But yeah. So I think super interesting point. But still, really really funny the fact that we are making fun of Monopoly. We have been for 60 years, and I'm pretty sure if we look back, probably we'll find some earlier cases of people making fun of Monopoly, which
It's a
is
fine gaming tradition.
yeah.
We just you have to
Yeah,
dunk
it's
on the
it's it's
elders.
like it's part of our culture now. It's like if you don't dunk on Monopoly, you're not really a war gamer. And it was the case already in 65, so pretty interesting. So this one I call this category "Oh Sweet Summer Child" because I like the innocence of that period, because they are basically talking about stuff that became big things or big topics or big trends in the wargaming world afterwards. But in 65, it was like a radical new idea. What a good idea would be to actually cover more of Napoleonic warfare, because we only have a game on Waterloo. Wouldn't it be fun if we actually did more Napoleonic war games? Like, yeah, yes, Dan, that would be pretty fun. Like, who knows? It might ever happen. So, what do you think about this one?
Oh, I think it's wonderful because, now napoleonics is such a huge aspect of wargaming, and, I can't imagine our scene without it.
No.
Herman Lemon has some Napoleonic stuff coming out that I'm excited about. I'm waiting for I Napoleon to come off of the P500
Yeah, from
print
Fate
run.
Racer. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm pumped about that. Field Commander Napoleon. So like those, it's huge now. So
yeah,
it's really interesting. And actually, I kind of want to touch on this later too, um, because it has relevance later in the conversation. But it's really fun to think about how there was a point when we did not have all of these options that we have now. And so people were playing a really limited number of games. They were playing them really intensely, and they had a lot of time to like get really deep into them, but they also wanted other things. And I think that there's something really kind of special about that.
yeah. And I think it's interesting, and it's something that we highlighted in our previous episode. There was literally someone sending an email saying that they had all the war games in their collection, and how funny it was, because at the time it was like 8 games, and it was like really not impressive. Like if you compare it to that today, like you could have like, I don't know, a full warehouse of games, and like you wouldn't have all of them. So I thought it was pretty funny. But yeah, this lack of options was really interesting, and I think it taps into the whole DIY spirit of the time that we'll talk a bit more later down the line. But yeah, Stan was hoping for Napoleonic warfare games, and I guess he got his wish granted in a way. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of,
I would
right?
love to see a follow up, like all these. What did future Stan experience of Napoleonics? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be
Like
super interesting.
I would have loved to see something like that.
Well, Stan Welcott, if you're still alive today, please reach out. We would like to
Yeah,
have your point of view on: are you happy? Are you satisfied with everything that was released?
or
So
do there
that,
need to be more?
yeah. Exactly, a plea. Do you need to do a plea for Napoleonic Warfare 2.0 in that era? I would be surprised. The other thing that I thought was particularly fitting, as you were the my partner in that series, is the first attempt at coming up with a solitaire variant for a game. So that's the Midway Solitaire option by Robert Olson, and I was like, ah, those damn solitaire players already in 65 annoying us with stupid bots. But yeah, so yeah, it was there, pretty funny. And I think it's the first time that I noticed someone in the magazine coming up with an option to actually say, okay, this is a sequence of play that is actually going to be a true solitaire mode of a multiplayer game. I don't know if there was one before, and if so, did you see it? But what did you think of this?
So this is the first one I noticed. The only thing that disappoints me about it is that there's racial slurs in it, but oh well, we're gonna keep going. Yeah, I honestly, come on, Fred, you can't complain. Like this is doing solitaire modes. I love it because it just goes to show, right, that people have always wanted to be able to play games on their own, and that all of you people being cranky about it are just wrong. Like this is a need the community has. But it delights me because I think it's a really good pairing with, like, if you look in like sort of the personal ads at the end where people are looking for people to play
Yeah,
with. There's so many people who are just desperate to play with someone. They want to play these games. They want to make it happen. So they will make it happen. We're in that DIY spirit of the time, and it. I think that this one of the things I think makes wargaming special for solo gamers, and one of the reasons I think that we as a solo community as a whole should pay more attention, is that this is really where our sadly only fathers, but forefathers are, right,
mm,
in the hobby, because the people who are really on the cutting edge of learning how to play games by yourself are wargamers.
yeah,
And I think that that is really cool. And this, a lot of the mechanisms that people are starting to come up with, like, this solo mode makes sense. Things are going to get more advanced over the next several decades, right? But it is really interesting to see kind of like the early ways of thinking about how to do it in a manageable way. Like, how do I make this work in a way that's realistic and doable? You can see like the beginnings of all those thought lines that we're still talking about when we review solo games, when we create solo modes now. All those BGG homebrews like have a parent
yeah.
in this stuff.
Yeah, and I think it was pretty interesting. Like, and you already have, when you look through the whole content, like different options depending on different situation. That was actually pretty reminiscent of what you would find in a less elaborate way, but still the same ideas that you would find in a solo bot for in coin games, for example. Depending on the situation on the board, the bot will be doing different things, like basic programmation, which I thought was pretty interesting. And actually, this reminds me that Joe actually made a very interesting point about Monopoly. He said that, and that's a really good point. Landlord's Game, which was the original game before Monopoly, was
Yep.
actually already technically making fun of Monopoly before it was released. So even before Monopoly was even a game, and like uh, gamers were already dunking on Monopoly. So really interesting thought here.
Yes,
And
the
then
oldest and finest tradition.
yes, exactly. And then another of our traditions in the wargaming hobby, which is having a big debate around what is deemed a valid game or not. And there is this whole thing around a critic of non-war games from Avalon Hill, which is, as we said in the introduction, is actually a big part of the production. Avalon Hill was doing a lot of different things, some economical games, some war games, and they were actually cross promoting them to the same audience. And you wanted
Yep.
to highlight this one. So, what did you specifically thought was interesting in that one?
Well, I think what I thought was interesting was that early emergence of war versus not war. I
Yeah.
mean, as you know, we get to have lovely debates about that every year. And it's just, I feel like it's really fun to see it as a tale as old as time. I mean, I would not say that management is a war game, right? But it's
No.
really interesting that that's the delineation that you want. Like, you're buying Avalon Hill games, you are getting the Avalon Hill magazine, you are an Avalon Hill fanboy, and that's still a distinction that you feel it is important to make. It really goes to show how, like, these are our games, these are war games, is so deep in the hobby and how our communities form around those ideas. Like, they're so tightly held, right? And these concepts are so important to various subsets of our hobby. And you can see it starting right here. And I think that that is fascinating. I mean, it's really funny. Like, what is old is new again.
Mm,
Um, so many things that you see in the general. Like, honestly, if you just transported these conversations and updated the language to now, I
yeah.
wouldn't think any of them were weird, except for a plea for Napoleonic warfare, but it would just be a plea for something different.
I think
But
if
it
you
would
change
fit.
if you change the titles of the game also, so because that would be weird that someone is making a big thing around D-Day that was released in 64, that would be like, why? But if you just change you replace management by food chain magnate, I think
Yeah.
it's still a valid discussion. But yeah,
Yeah.
pretty interesting. And it's interesting because Avalon Hill also will be the publisher that will blur the line. Avalon Hill is the original wargame publisher, but it's also the first publisher who blurs the line between big strategy games, war games, and merging it with history. And you were talking about Republic of Rome. This is the perfect example. What is Republic of Rome, and does it matter? And should it be rewarded by a wargame award or not? Should it be covered by wargame magazines? Should it be covered by wargame media? It's like, yeah, I think it should, but then it was already there, like from the inception, which I think is actually quite interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, somebody asked if Squander comes up in this article. Yes, it does. It is rated as the worst one for war gamers to play.
yeah,
Nobody
and
likes Squander, apparently.
yeah, and Joe notes that it's rated 3.2 on BGG, which is so low that it actually makes me want to try it, because
Like, so bad it might be good.
yeah, and so there might be some interesting ideas. I mean, yeah,
Are you going to squander some money on it?
yeah. Oh,
Oh.
but yeah, if I find one copy that is cheap, I think it would be interesting to have a look at it, even if a Monopoly killer is not really the kind of game that I'm looking for. But yeah, so interesting topics. Nothing is new. Everything is is old. All of our discussions are more or less the same. I thought that was a really interesting part of that volume 2, even more so than volume 1. I felt.
Yeah,
So that
it's
was
very Ecclesiastes, right? Like, there's nothing new under the sun.
yeah, exactly. And I thought the first one was really focused on the tactics of the different game and talking about it's which is still the case in volume 2, but we see emerging like meta discussions
Hmm.
in this volume too, a lot more than in for the first volume, which, and I think this highlights that quite well.
Yeah, for sure.
And talking about this, there is actually quite a few discussions around what makes an Avalon Hill a game player a player. There is a lot of discussion around the etiquette, around how you should interact with other wargamers, and you wanted also to highlight some of the ads to find players. So I think there was really a very specific vibe, but also a lot of self-awareness. What was your reflections on this overall?
So I really find the ads to be the absolute highlight at the end of all of these
Yeah,
magazines because they're so cute.
yeah,
Like, I sort of read them and I'm like, oh, I want to play with these people. Like, this would be so fun. Like, I would like this to be my game club for the most part. But what I liked about these particular two cuts is that they represent kind of a mix. So, there are people who are, you know, inexperienced and a little nervous, and you can tell from
yeah,
the ad, and it's sort of, it's sweet, you know what I mean? Like, this is somebody who wants to learn how to play a game with somebody, and they're like a little nervous. Maybe they don't want to get, they don't want to feel stupid, right? Like, they want to feel like they belong as part of this club, and they're a little gentle. But then you get like the triumvirate challenges you. We challenge everybody. We're gonna get you. We take no prisoners. And like, that's like, it tickles me next to like beat your chest over there on the other side, right? But then I actually really loved that John Nichols' attention. If you wish to continue our bout, which began in the summer of
yeah,
1963 at your apartment in New Orleans, please contact. Like, it makes me think of like the cute board game version of like a Craigslist misconnection.
yeah.
You know what I
I,
mean? Like, there's something so endearing about it. It just really warmed my heart.
and the thing that I liked about the John Nichols ad, it's so who's trying to finish a game that was started 2 years earlier, reminds me of the running joke on the server, which is when you start an asynchronous game with me, I would maybe take the first turn and then never play ever again. And I feel like I would have had an ad, like someone reaching out to me, maybe every magazine saying, "What the fuck, Fred? I've been waiting since 1963 for you to take your turn at D-Day," or something like this. So I really felt, I was like, "Oh, I can relate. This is actually the discussions that we're having on Discord right now." So it felt, yeah, I thought it
Yeah.
was really cute.
The speed
And
of the internet did not fix the core problem.
no, no. And Patrick is saying, true story. It is entirely possible that I have a game with Patrick that I forgot about that we started async and I still haven't taken my turn. I don't remember. And if it's the case, Patrick, I'm kind of sorry, but in a way, you knew what you were getting into. So you have also a part of responsibility here. But yeah. And it's funny because you like those ads, you actually enjoy reading them, and
I
already at the
do.
time, there were people saying, "Oh, like they were reacting to the ads." So that was already a big thing at the time. And I think this article beat your chest and talking about the opponents wanted ads at the time. They were already self-aware about the fact that
Yeah.
this was a very fun part of the story. Oh, Patrick, very good joke. I like it. Yes. Good. Maybe there is a vassal module for Squander, and we could start an asynchronous game for it.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
I'm pretty
you,
sure that's the modern version of Squander is just go to your friendly local cave store with your wallet,
yeah,
and
that's
then
probably.
you succeed.
I have no idea, and I literally want to play this game now. I'm too tempted. But yeah, this really cute ad I really like. Help! I'm an inexperienced player who needs play by mail opponent. I will play all experts who want an easy win. Like that's so amateur who wants to play someone at their own level. If interested, contact Ken Just. Poor old Ken Just. That's very cute. Very, very cute. All the way in California. And that's the thing, a lot of those people were closer to the East Coast. I think it makes sense based on where Avalon Hill was. And there is also, they talk about this, which is quite interesting. They are mostly hiring people in the Midwest and in the west
Yeah.
side of the country because those are the areas that they have a hard time to reach. And they understand that organizing the community over there is the way for
Hmm.
them to promote their games and create a sense of community over there for people to interact and start reaching a new audience. But it really feels, and you feel it really in the first volume. It's very much it looks like a very East Coast kind of thing. which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
And
Also, these are a little poetic too. Like that
yeah,
inexperienced American general wishes amateur German field marshal to engage him in a lively battle. Like it's so
it's a
cute. Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
It's a tiny bit homoerotic. I think there is a bit of those really weird manga where they take two characters and they make a weird erotic version of it. There is a bit that vibe. I feel like there is something there, maybe something to explore. We don't know. There might actually have been a whole gay wargaming subculture there, something to explore. And honestly, if someone, yeah, I don't know if there were, I would be curious, like to hear from people from the time. But I think it would be
Like I met the love of my life through the wargame
yeah,
personals and the general.
that
Honestly,
would
that would
be
be the
that would
cutest
be
thing.
so cute. Yeah, it's like, hey, we played Africa Course. Like like that would be, I don't know. I would love that. I would want to watch a movie about it. So yeah. So if you
I feel
know,
like a romance novel for the community is brewing here.
yeah, exactly. I'm gonna write a fanfic, a homoerotic fanfic about two players reading the general. I think some players in the community might love this. I think that's gonna be really, really appreciated. But yeah,
Oh man. But then you get the
talking.
question, right, of who really plays Avalon Hill games. And I actually think that like this conversation, right, is very related. Um
So do you
who
want?
is an Avalon Hill player?
Yeah,
This article was kind of cool though because I thought it was one thing I thought was really interesting about this one is that first of all I think they have the same thing going on that is true for GMT and Compass and stuff today. So 20% of our mailing list purchase 80% of our games. There is like a very like that business model for wargame publishers has clearly been like the thing since like the very beginning of wargame time, right? Like there's a very core fan base that buys everything.
yeah,
And we are also guilty. um but think about like the people who get like subscriptions to this. This is the tradition, right? The traditions hold like even without and like in the absence of Avalon Hill, like its successors, its spiritual successors, right, continue to see similar business model stuff. I'm also really tickled by the age range stuff
yeah. That's what I was about to
because
highlight. Yeah, I
they're
think it's okay.
so young.
They are
Median age for the first group is 17 and the second group is 25. And
25.
what
Yeah.
happens in between? They meet girls.
Yeah, so it's actually, this is really interesting. And okay, it's really hard for me to talk about, but it's linked to my job. I cannot talk about the my job, but we actually observe the same effect. And I work for a toy company. In the toy company that I work for, we have actually younger kids that are playing with our toys, and we have adults playing with our toys. And in the middle, we have something that we call internally the dark age, the age at which the kids don't play with our toys anymore, and they come back to it when they are young professionals, or sometimes when they get kids themselves and they buy the toys for their kids, but actually they often play with it themselves. And that's actually the same thing. They have a bit the same thing. And I think in their case, I don't think it's really about girls that much. It's mostly probably about university. I think that when they're out of high school and they go to university, it might be really hard for them to actually buy games and everything. But it might be at that period they were actually maybe more into clubs and stuff like this. But I think it's really interesting. And if there is one thing that has changed, I agree with you that some of this thing is the same. You have a core community that is actually buying most of the games, but then you have this idea that the age has radically shifted, and I
The
think
age
that
has
should be,
shifted
yeah,
big.
it should be a massive wake up call. Like it's like the two of us right now, we
Yeah,
are the really young people in the hobby, and
right.
at that period we would have been the grandpa and grandma of the hobby. So that's maybe something that, yeah, to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
and
well, I
hi,
think it's really
Mike,
funny
by
here.
the way.
An occasional letter from a PhD will state that he and his wife cannot understand how to even get started, while the 12-year-olds will congratulate us on the clearly presented rules. Like, that's just a really interesting sentence overall. Um, because this is like actually the only mention I can remember seeing of a woman sitting down to play a game.
Yeah,
Like the PhD and his wife. Like, hmm. But also, I think it's very funny, like, that kind of like wargaming is always full of kind of validation and intellectual posturing. And I think it's really interesting to contrast like the PhD and the 12-year-old.
yeah,
Like that kind of rhetorical choice is classic now too, actually.
Mm.
It's sort of an interesting call. And then also they mentioned, like, most of you hear about the game through a friend's recommendation. That's true. We are the main vector of wargaming, right? Like, it's our job to
Yeah.
like addict everybody around us to make more wargamers. Like, it's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And they're telling us, like, okay, what magazines are the most popular? So Lifetime and Boys Life, Military and Egghead magazines rate highly.
No idea what those are. But already
What?
Boys Life. What is Boys Life? I mean,
I've heard the title. I've never actually read it.
yeah. Wait a minute. I need to see one of those cover. Boys Life, 1965. Let's see what it looks like. Some images. Oh, yeah, that looks like a like scouting, adventure-y, sportsy.
Oh, Meandering
Yeah.
Mike is here to help us out. He says that Boys Life is the Boy Scout magazine.
Oh yeah, it looked like a Boy Scout thing when I was looking at the covers. Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
He also says that he played and bought the most games during college. You know what? That's actually when I had my first big video game phase that wasn't being a child. So, like, I played video games. I didn't play them that much in high school. I played them like up to because I got really busy. And then I went to college and I got into video games again. And then I took another bit of break, and a couple years into grad school, I got into video games again. I think that there's like definitely, like, when you're in school, it's a big.
Yeah, but it's really interesting, and I think it relates with also what we've seen in the first volume, and that's something that we're talking about. What was the audience that we were seeing in those magazines? Young white boys, probably a bit more middle or upper class, in the suburbs, in the chess club, in the finance club, and it made me laugh quite a lot. The fact that you have a finance club to have fun. Finance club. Apparently, Boy Scouts, which makes sense. So you really have like a kind of a pretty coherent and maybe a bit narrow population that is there. And maybe for us to progress, because we are already at half an hour, I think just on that theme, there is this, and you see Mike, chess club. You see, yeah. So that was no surprises.
Got him.
Yeah. And yeah, so this one you wanted to highlight. Yeah.
This made me so sad. Like, okay, it was nice of you to include me on your mailing list. Unfortunately, being a girl, I have no great interest in battle games. It makes me wonder, how did this kid get on the mailing list? Is this real? Like, is it real? So if it's real, I think what makes me sad is that a girl who really wasn't interested wouldn't have written back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
this is a girl who read it all and decided that she wasn't gonna be able to get involved. And, like, there's something about this that makes me sad, because that's what I see in it. Like, if a student wrote to me about, something that was like, well, I don't know if Latin club's for me, but blah, 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 blah about Latin club, I'd be like, oh shit, this kid wants to be in Latin club.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, and it's like you wouldn't have, because she read everything. She said, she talks about the layout. She talks about the tone of the articles and everything. And it's actually quite interesting.
But of course, the other possibility is that it's fake.
Yeah, and
in
that's
which
what
case,
Gary's
like,
saying.
That's being played for jokes, which is also sad, really.
Which is
because it's
even
an
worse,
assumption you should not make.
So imagine the letter is fake, and there is a girl that is actually like Nina and actually interested and doesn't know how to engage, and she reads this. And I think that makes it very clear that she should never send a mail, because if this is a joke. So I think that none of the two options are really great. One of them is actually heartbreaking, and the other is like, well, that's a really bad move, and that's a pretty dumb move. But for the record, I looked into it, and I did find a Nina Eisenstein that would have had the right age in Maryland at that time. So I'm just saying, maybe it's here. And if Nina is listening to us, her and Cardi B can come, and we will play a game of Churchill together. I think it's becoming a bit more and more complex and convoluted. And for people who join the stream midway, they probably won't understand why I'm talking about Cardi B, but it will all make sense maybe at some point in the future.
Someday we'll get there.
And Gary is saying early sock puppet, yeah. But I think it's not, yeah. Anyway, and we have Eric here who's also sharing his experience. So most of his growth period was high school, playing a lot of Third Reich, Panzerblitz, and France 1940. If we're limiting it to Avalon Hill, so later than the 60s that we're going through right now. But it's yeah, it's really interesting. And Eric, does it mean that you actually like calm down on the playing during the college period and then came back to it as an older adult? So what was your experience going in and out of the hobby? That would be interesting to have your perspective on this. Cool. Anything else you want to say on this heartbreaking letter?
No, I can't tell if I want it to be real or not. It's probably fake, but you know, it's just one of those things where I don't know which actuality is worse.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I kind of wish it's real, but yeah. Anyway, I think it's something to keep in mind that this was played as a joke at the time, and I look at my YouTube statistics today and have 99.1% of male audience. So maybe there is
Yeah,
something that is actually that in 60 years hasn't changed, and maybe there is something at play here that we should be working with. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, and when you look into looking for players, I haven't seen a single girl writing in there. So I think it's yeah.
yeah. Mike says it sounds like it was written by somebody's wife that was part of the company.
Yeah, but she says being a girl. I think it's supposed to sound like the sister of someone. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe an investigation for episode 3, the quest for Nina Eisenstein, and we'll sort it out. So remember to subscribe. Remember to support the channel by donating on Ko-fi, and to be part of the investigation on Discord and know more about Cardi B's love for card-driven games. So yeah, support the channel. Anyway, let's jump to something maybe a bit more positive, and it's a category where I put a lot of different things that I call BGG before BGG, and some of it we already touched upon, but I think there was actually a lot of things where I was looking into it and I was like, oh, that's a typical board game geek post. Like I could see it everywhere, and I was like, my God, nothing has changed. This is insane. And there was one that you actually raised that was the Intercontinental Society. So why did this one grab your attention?
You know, I think I love that it was a Kriegspiel society, because what have we been talking about doing on Twitter recently? Playing a big old online game of Kriegspiel. And, you know, I think it's really fun that, like, you know, these kinds of, you know, and of course they could just mean general war games, right? Like, however, you know, this idea that we're kind of going back and we're referring back to our roots, which start with something as early as Kriegspiel, is really charming to me. And it just made me happy to think about people from who were reading this as teenagers also wanting to play Kriegspiel. And then, like, you and I have talked about how much fun it would be to play some Kriegspiel. You know, there's just something about the constant echo, right? That, you know, if you're into war games, you're into history. And any moment where you're touching history or seeing other people do the same thing is just kind of a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty cool. There is one thing that George just said that I want to bring to your attention, which I don't think is true. I think he's too smart for his own good. But his point is Nina Agdazanova wrote the original screenplay for Cuirassé Potemkin by Eisenstein. So if he suspects it's a sophisticated joke,
I'm gonna give you some tinfoil.
Yeah. And I would give him communist tinfoil. Like it's nah, I'm not sure, Joe. I think it's your I'm not sure. Alex is convinced. I am definitely not. I think it's way too sophisticated and convoluted. I think, and that audience is probably not a big. You don't have probably a big corpus of Eisenstein fan in the community. So unsure about this. The other thing that I thought was really interesting was the question boxes that you have in all of the issues where people ask questions about the rules, about specific games and everything. So they categorize it by game, and you have those questions that are answered. Sometimes the answers are usually extremely like short. They are yes, no, like stuff like this, and you really can feel the anger of the designer behind it. It's like, have you read the rule book? Like it's like,
It's
and I
in the
could
syllabus.
I was like, it was like, I can feel this. I can feel in the yes, the all the annoyance of someone reading the same question for the 1100th time. It's like there is 3 threads about this on BGG. It is fucking in the rule. Why are you asking the question? So I could, yeah, I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then I chose this perfect plan screenshot just because the guy looks so young. Oh, he's a kid. But also I thought it was very cute to talk about like perfect plans and like, I liked that he was so funny about it. Like, oh, the perfect plan actually makes things boring, but let me tell you about my perfect plan. But people love strategy guides, and I also think that, it's just really fun to see. It's just like a self-aware little column that's still looking for that best strategy, because I think we
yeah.
all do that. And so I just thought it was very relatable. It looked like somebody's, session report or somebody's, you know, um, little guide on BGG to help all the rest of us peons who don't know how to play the game. It
Yeah.
was cute. I liked
Yeah,
it a lot.
it was very cute, and there is a lot of this, and I think there is also a status thing when you become an editor for the magazine. You want to show your credentials, and most of them, their first article, they write this thing about explaining you how to play a game, which is quite funny because usually the next issue you have someone writing an article explaining why they are wrong and this is stupid, which is, I don't know what kind of vibe it was, if there was actually like literal narrative arc of people arguing game over game about the best strategies and actually being rivals. But yeah, you have a lot of those, and some of those really look like just babies, like childs. They were like,
Yeah.
ooh, so it's
Yeah.
really cute. And Jan is saying something interesting about the Avalon Hill International Kriegspiel Society. It was actually saying that it still exists, but it used Kriegspiel just as a wider term for war games. So, and George Phillies is one of the heads. So it's actually,
Oh,
it's
cool.
really interesting to see that this appeared in 1965. We have the receipt that says, well, this is what happens, and they talk about it, and it's still here today. So I think that's a pretty nice piece of history.
Yeah. That's awesome. Also, does that mean that we get to argue about what is a Kriegspiel?
No, please don't. I cannot take a debate like that. It is impossible. And yeah, and then there is another article by the infamous Louis Zocchi. So infamous because I think he's the wife beater
He is,
from
yes.
Volume 1. So if you don't know what we're referring to, go back to the first episode
But
that you can find on Liz's channel.
I remember him as the guy who likes to let his burnt cigarette just dangle over somebody else's game board.
Yeah, which is quite funny, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. The thing about annoying the other player, so the strat, like psychological warfare, I think was pretty fun in the first volume. But
Yeah, absolutely
not
hilarious.
not that this article is really important, but he's actually hammering the point that more than anything, the journal is a community organizing magazine, which is super interesting. They are really all about that. They are really focused on this. This is why 2 out of the 12 pages almost are about opponents, about finding opponents, about playing together. They have PBM leagues. They have they are really focused on that. It's super important for them, and it's actually super important to see. And they're really hammering the point every time. So I think that's like the community aspect is really strong.
He also reiterates that most of the wargamers in their late teens at this time.
Yeah.
And I love that for this time period, and while I really appreciate collective wisdom, I wish that we had more teens now.
Yeah.
It would make me so happy if one of my students wanted me to teach them to play a wargame. I would be delighted.
Yeah. The thing is that the problem that I see here is, I guess that most of the teens don't even know that they exist. And I think that's
No.
probably because I'm pretty sure, like, for example, me as a teenager, you showed me a war game. Like, I was playing Warhammer and stuff like this. Like, if you showed me something like a war game, like a historical one on a topic that I was interested in, I would have went nuts. Like, especially if it was an older person that I looked up to. that would show me one of those games that was like historical based. They would guide me and make me understand everything. I would have went really nuts. Like it's just that I wasn't aware that it existed. So I think
See,
that yeah,
I got lucky. So my high school history teacher / Model UN coach, he's actually been on my podcast because he like has his students play it through at least a couple turns of Here I Stand when he's teaching Euro history. Like he's serious about it. It's the episode of Kirby Whitehead for those of you who want to go look that up on the Beyond Solitaire podcast. But you know, he had GMT games and Axis and Allies and stuff in his classroom when I was younger, and
yeah,
so I didn't necessarily have. We didn't put the time in necessarily playing stuff through the way that he emphasizes even more now in his classes. However, I had that early exposure, so when I thought about getting into games later, I knew GMT as a brand.
yeah.
And so, you know, I had a template to work with later. And actually, I'm going to be back in my hometown for like a week before Christmas this year, and I'm probably going to try to get him to like play a game with me because I think it'd be so fun at this age. I would say that. So, Alistair says something interesting. Like, no problem getting teens into board gaming though. It can be hard. So I run a game club. And there are a couple issues that affect what kinds of games you can play. One is that the kids, you know, they kind of make up their own minds coming in what they want. A lot of them want to play D&D because that's just more popular. Some of them have already gotten into Magic the Gathering, so that's what they want to play. I do manage to introduce students to gateway games pretty often, like Splendor or something like that. But we have really limited time after school. I can't stay long enough to play something really big typically. And also, frankly, you know, it takes a while to get the kids ready for a time commitment like a heavier game. And so there are some students I think would be super into it. There are others, like they're just not, I don't get the sense that they're ready. And so I'm keeping them on the stuff that I know they'll play until they open it up for me to suggest something else.
And I guess we should be moving along. We're at 45 already, and
Yeah.
we still have quite a lot of content. I thought we wouldn't have enough, and actually, we're already almost over time. So, quite a few topics. I think it's really interesting and something that we also mentioned before. But there was really clearly this communication between the interest in reading about history and military history and wargaming. So there was clearly this thing about using those as different ways to engage. They are using war games as different ways to engage with history. Already they are seeing that they are not just games, which is something that is really interesting, something that is relevant because it's something that we've been discussing lately. But yeah, and actually shout out to Stuart because Blue and Gray book list, a list of books about the American Civil War. So I thought, hey, that's for Stuart. He might enjoy those. So yeah. And then there is one thing that is a very tiny, small bit, and you need to be a sci-fi nerd to actually enjoy this. But I found this when I was looking at the Chief of Staff's reading list. I think it's the second issue in the volume 2, where they're talking about different books. And actually, I thought it was really super interesting because in there, they talk about different types of books, and I was really interested that they were interested in this. So they talk all about the economics aspects of national security. Super interesting, not clearly directly linked to kinetic warfare, but actually more the economical and organizational part of it. So already they're thinking about something else. And we've been talking about psychological warfare around the wargaming, but they're actually talking about psychological warfare in gaming, in war itself. And they highlight this book, Psychological Warfare, by Paul M.A. Lindbarger, a book released by 1955. And this lieutenant was actually someone who wrote manuals for the American military around specifically psychological warfare, but it's actually known under another name. And that's why I saw this. I thought, whoa, that's actually super interesting. This person, Paul M.A. Lindberger, is actually named Cordwainer Smith as for the readers of science fiction, and is the writer of the instrumentality whole cycle thing. So I thought it was really interesting to have that bit of connection. But that's super nerdy, but it's here. I think it's interesting. But overall, I think it's this list of books are really interesting. Like it talks about the influence of military and diplomacy, and already you can see that they were interested in different topics than purely kinetic warfare. And I thought that was actually an interesting aspect of some of those reading lists, where I could see that the interest was growing broader than just, oh, I'm going to look at the operation to take Tobruk. Like they were thinking about other things. I don't know if you looked a bit at the book lists on your side.
Yeah, I just skipped it. That was a really good sci-fi find. I would never have found that. Also, in my dreams, can I play Pax Run as fast as 45 minutes? But I will consider it. I do have a copy, so.
So Pax Resistance 45 minutes, you totally can play it in 45 minutes. The thing for it to be possible is I would play only 2 players for it to work. 3 players might be possible, but you need all of the players to know exactly how the game plays.
Right.
But I think it's the case for quite a few PAX games. For example, if you make me play a PAX Premier game 2 players, the game can be done in 15 minutes. Like it can be really, really fast. But the problem that is not highlighted here is that if you use this in a setting for like high school, there is so many intricacies in the game that you could play in 45 minutes, but you need hours and hours and hours of practice before getting to a point where you could play in 45 minutes. So unrealistic. Anyway, going back to the reading list, sorry. So yeah, did you look at the books a bit, or you didn't really?
Only a bit. I don't have anything particularly intelligent to say about them. I love that there are reading lists. I feel like that's something that we do now as well.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the things that makes wargaming special is that you get a game and then you go read a bunch about it.
Yeah.
And like not everybody does that, but I do feel like that's very common among people in our sector of the hobby. And I love that about us as a community. And I wouldn't change it. So I'm glad that it's been, something that has been going on for so long. I also think that, these kinds of habits, right, also do, I think, need to inform our discussions of these games as we go. Because, one thing that's always my sawhorse, right? Like I like to talk about, it's never just a game, and it's not, right? It's like picking up an entire worldview. It's picking up an entire view of history. Our games are really reflective of what we're reading and what we're thinking about and like the kind of information we've been exposed to. And so these things in conjunction with the games people are playing is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. And it's something that we're getting back to. I was actually happy to see that I think it was a year ago or maybe a bit less, something like this, that the player aids starting talking about books on their channel. And I was like, great, more talks about books, less unboxing. I'm all in for that. I think this is awesome. I think it's a good direction to take. I kind of lost track of the whole Wargame book club thing, but you actually motivated me to pick it back up when you hosted the discussion around Homo Ludens, the book by Huizinga. And I think it should be probably more part of our discussions, part of the format that we do and everything. So I think it's a really good point, and also a good reminder for me. It was that we should talk more about books, because overall, I think it's something that we should include more in our discussions. And so Paul Lindberger is actually more interesting than what I expected. Super interesting. Thanks, Joe. Liz, are you still with us? Because I think your image froze. I don't know if it's only me. In the chat, if you see that. Okay, did we lose Liz? It looks like it, right? Can you still hear me, by the way? Or am I not live anymore? Oof. I am unsure. Yeah, okay, so Mike, you can still hear me. That's cool. Okay, so I think it's just Liz. Yeah, but she was freezing a bit, and then she dropped off. So we'll see when she comes back. We're getting pretty close actually to the end of the stream. We just have a couple of things that we wanna cover. And Liz just sent me a message on Discord. She's trying to connect back. But yeah, there was this thing. Oh, and she's back. That I thought was pretty funny. So there is this article about how D-Day, the game, was used in medical research to evaluate the cognitive impact of taking drugs. So they use learning and playing D-Day as a mental exercise, and they subject so they don't say what drugs. And
Right.
I was like, well, 1965, like medical research,
How
probably
exciting
in the
are these
military.
drugs?
It's like, I mean, of course it was LSD. Like it has to be LSD. Like they were like high on LSD playing D-Day. And I'm like, imagine that experience, how awesome it must be. Like either you ate mushroom or you took a like a heroic dose of LSD and you're like, yeah, and you're like, ooh, I'm vibing, I'm playing D-Day, or I'm playing, oh my god, that's the kind of conventions that we need to start having,
Well,
people.
Fred, there's a woman whose entire shtick is that she eats edibles and then she does makeup tutorials.
That's awesome. I love
So,
it. We should do that.
once a few more legalities have changed in the United States.
Yeah, imagine that, how awesome it would be as a live stream, a 4-hour live stream to play a 30-minute game where you were just like high as fuck playing uh the game on Nixon. Which one is it? Watergate. Like that would be. I would love that. I think
Hey,
that would be.
tripping balls, rolling dice.
I think yeah, Joey's on, of course. Yeah, and Alistair is saying countries will look much more interesting than what they really are. Yeah, I think that would be awesome. I would be all in for that. New format idea. Let us know what you think. Wargaming on LSD. But I thought really interesting article. I don't have too much to say about it. I would say definitely go and read it. It's super funny, super interesting.
I would
And
love to
yeah,
watch this tape.
yeah, me too. I would love it. I
Like
would love it.
I would be really here for the tape.
Yeah. And they talk about how the other group couldn't concentrate. They were doing something else. They were not respecting the rules. It's really funny. It's really, really funny. I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to spend my a Sunday high on LSD playing war games. That's what I want to do.
So, for professional reasons, obviously I do not, but in a different world.
Yeah, of course, I'm making jokes.
Yeah.
I think drugs are bad and you shouldn't take them. And this is just a humoristic format. I
Yes,
think
just in
drugs
case
are
any
bad.
of my students have found this, no.
Do not do
Not you.
drugs. Yes. Good. And maybe to conclude on the something that we've talked about quite a few times, and that's the fact that there was this big DIY spirit uh, in the hobby at the time. You were talking about the fact that games were limited in their offers. You didn't have a lot of stuff, and a lot of things that sparked. What it sparked is that there is a huge interest, a community that is organizing itself, not that many games to be played, and they start making games themselves, which I think is
Yeah.
super interesting. What did you wanted to highlight in this?
Oh, there's something I just loved that this homebrew thing is already such a big part of wargaming. I feel like, again, like we talk about BGG before BGG, so many people have their own modes and they make their own little player aids and they make their own little rules and they make, P&Ps. And I love that was originally something that was so supported that blank parts were getting sold and that people were buying
Yeah.
them. I think that's awesome. And I really liked that, there's these different games that were coming up. Like one of them that was like it was like a Greek warfare game that somebody was making do it yourself. And I would love to play that. And I really wonder if any of these games had like made it into the future. You know what I mean? Like, did anybody ever publish any of these? Like, were these ever seen as like a pipeline? How many of these people went on to be game designers? Like, I didn't bother to sit and do that research because this is just for a quick stream on a Thursday afternoon. But I do kind of wonder how many of those do-it-yourselfers ever like do more? Did those games ever
Yeah.
see the light of day? But also, even if they don't, I think that that's really cool, and that not everything that you make has to see the light of day to be fun and awesome and worth your time. And I think it's really awesome. There are these like people doing homebrew stuff. They all refer to themselves as game nuts, and like we all also refer to ourselves as like a little crazy because we love our games so much. And then, of course, try something different with bulge just had to be included for obvious
Yeah.
headline reasons.
And going back to our theme around homoeroticism, there is definitely something here. I'm just saying there is something to uncover. And Mike saying, and that's actually something that Mike told us the other time, that he actually bought a lot of those maps and counters and everything. And yeah, if anyone from that period actually knows of people that actually started from there, or even designers that might be watching us and say, well, actually I started with this, and this is what I ended up doing, I would be really super curious to hear about it, because that seems like such a good idea. I would love if publishers were doing things like this, like a small box, like to make your own game and start to experiment. That would be so cool, and actually a really cool asset for in an educational context. And yeah, so I think it's definitely something to consider. And one last thing, and that's the last topic before we go, and it's a bit tough because it's actually a big one, and maybe we should
I
spend
kind of
more
wish
time
this
on
was
it.
the second to last, just in the sense that this is my least favorite. Like, I find Avalon Hill, the general, so charming in so many ways, and then these things, you find them and you're like, oh god damn it, like the fun, I mean, and like, this is of its time, right? And I try to read it with a generosity of spirit in that regard. And actually, this kind of led to a larger conversation I want to have. So let's be real, a Vietnam game column is
It's
not
awful.
acceptable. Like, this is not cute. This is not funny. It's really messed up. And, midway for the cautious racial slur, I actually looked it up because, some people try to argue that it's like Brit, it's just a shortening, but that's really clearly not the case in the United States. Like, Facebook has banned it. So, but what's interesting about reading this stuff is that I'm not really sure that it's meant maliciously.
No,
It's not okay. It represents mindsets that, need to change. But the other thing that I guess was really interesting to me is that, this is a Vietnam game column that's coming out. This would have been 1966 by now, I think.
No, it was.
Is it still 65?
It's January 66. So it means that when they wrote it, it was the last quarter of 65, because they released this in January 66. So the war was clearly on, like, happening, being resolved. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting. Like, they were making games where their own country was involved.
Yes.
It was, the temporality of it is uncanny. I would say quite surprising.
Yes,
I don't have any thoughts or judgment, but I was quite surprised too.
Well, I actually think it kind of reflects on, we're having some conversations now about whether it's in bad taste to do a game about Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see. So Avalon Hill decides not to make a Vietnam game at this time, and they're like, oh, let's just do, what was it? There's something else that they say they're going to do at the end, a different battle, like Guadalcanal or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that they flirt with the idea of doing the Vietnam game, and at the end they're like, screw it. Even though it's in kind of a way that I don't consider appropriate at all. There's also, I think, a hesitance to do something that's so... Operation Starlight was in 1965.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. But it's really interesting, right, to see them kind of playing with what to do so close to the real events. And, even though I don't like some of the language about World War II games that's coming in, these are also people, depending on who designers are, like, yes, mostly teenagers are playing, but that means that their parents and their grandparents are, those memories of World War II are not far back in time.
Yeah. And if you look at the age groups that we were talking about earlier, quite a few of those players were born during World War II, so their parents were directly impacted by it. So there is, once again, the temporality aspect of it is actually quite interesting. They might be playing battles where, like, direct relatives and not grandparents were actually involved, which is actually super interesting. And Gary is asking, doesn't They All Look Alike imply this story was a racist joke?
Oh, it is.
It is definitely racist. Yeah.
Absolutely. It doesn't get any better.
Oh yeah.
But it's a shame, right? Like, and like, I think it's interesting you talked about, because for the record, right, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage with this material, and it doesn't mean that we can't appreciate the good things that the general did for the hobby. It does mean we need to be thinking about our history critically, and it does mean that we need to think about which attitudes from the past are still existing now and what to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and that goes back to all of the discussions that we're having. Is like, yeah, we know that something was created within a specific historical and material context, and this we completely relate and understand. But that's not where you shouldn't be critical of it. We should grow beyond, and maybe there are some things that we're still experiencing today that we shouldn't, and we should actively try to make a change. And that's cool. We still find this charming, and we still enjoy our time doing it, but just, yeah, we cannot gloss over the fact that, well, there are some stuff that are really weird,
Yeah,
that we need to address. That is definitely there, and I think it's interesting to see how some of those discussions are still happening today, and maybe in a less direct or problematic way. We might have the same problem with a game on Ukraine, for example. What
yeah,
kind of distance we have to the topic? Are we sure, like, in war, the first casualty is truth, and it's like, really, is it really the right time to actually make a serious and honest simulation about what's happening right now? Do you even want to make money? Do you want to create a product? Like, it's a lot of ethical consideration that we should think about, and I think it's interesting that it's already a topic at that time, as,
yeah,
yeah, they are making games during the Vietnam War, which is pretty interesting, and was the first time that I saw that they were actually mentioning the Vietnam War
yeah,
in the thing, which I thought was actually quite surprising, because in a way, like, they talk about war all the time, and at that very moment in time, this country is at war, and they are not talking about it, which is quite interesting and striking. But yeah,
yeah. Over the time span of the game, I'd be interested in seeing this like conversational thread continue to develop too.
yeah, yeah, I would be curious to see what happens in the next volumes. And talking about
Yeah,
this, what's coming next? Well, there is a small box at the end of the final issue of Volume 2. They say it's the final issue of the General, which is actually not, but within that format, it was the final. And they will go from a really black and white 12-page magazine to something that is a bit more fancy, which is going to be Volume 3, The General, which will have 16 pages, pretty crazy stuff. More examples of plays, more diagrams, because it was very text heavy. Diagrams, I think, were pretty hard. It looks like it was pretty hard to integrate. But yeah, so we ended up at that volume 2 on the verge of modernity, with this volume 3, where we're going to have actually color covered with color covers, which is going to be a big shift. So we look into this. We don't really have time for, we haven't decided the time for that yet, but that's definitely something that we're considering. And of course, if you enjoy the series, please let us know, engage with it, and encourage us to continue, because it's also for us the big motivational part. It's super interesting for us, but if we can see that there is also enthusiasm around it, that's also a great motivation for us to continue. And then Liz and I were actually thinking about, also, as I was saying in the introduction, playing some game of the era. And I think at that time, so for those volume 1 and 2, there is two games that are discussed a lot, and that's Africa Corps and D-Day. So it would be interesting to have your point of view. Have some of you played it or not? What did you think about those games? Do you think they aged well? And actually, Liz, you are saying that you actually found a box of Africa Corps.
I
Can you?
did.
Yeah.
This was like $30. I was really excited. This is a deal. So yes, I've got a copy of Africa Core. If you want to play it, you better get your copy from that bum who's not sending you his copy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, and I think I found a copy. So there was one copy in the UK, that was held in a second hand by Second Chance Game. I sent them a mail on BGG to buy it. They never replied. And then actually Niels, who has this amazing stock of old war games still under blister, which is like under like in mint condition and everything. He knows that he has a copy of Africa Corps in his collection. It's just that he has so many games all around the place that he still hasn't located it. But as soon as he does, he should send me his copy of Africa Corps, and we should be able to start a play of the game, and we'll organize
Yeah.
a session where we
Then we
can.
can leave off, and I'll leave you a personal ad where you live 2 years later, asking to resume the
Yes,
match.
yes, exactly. So you can like go through the actual experience of starting a game and having never end. And actually, Gary is saying that he would like to see a playthrough of Tactics 2. That could actually be also quite fun. It looks like I lost Liz again. Liz, are you here? Oh, sad. Anyway, Tactics 2 could be a good option too. I think that would be really interesting. But I think those, yeah, clearly I would like to explore some of those games. Tactics 2 is one of them. Africa Corps is also one of them. And then we see what could be a good thing. I think there are vessel modules for most of them. Well, actually, Alistair is saying that, yeah, there are vessel modules. So that's really great. And yeah, and Mike, you have the same problem as Niels. Finding where the games are is clearly a challenge when you have such a massive collection. Yeah, looks like I lost Liz once again. Anyway, it was an awesome discussion. I know that we both had a lot of fun actually going through this volume 2, so 65, 66 period of the General from Avalon Hill. Super fun. I hope that you actually also enjoyed hearing those discussion as much as we enjoyed actually going through it and discussing all of this. It looks like Mike is is very much enjoying this, which is great. And it's really cool that actually people who enjoy the content at the time also enjoy seeing us, like from another generation, coming in and enjoying it too. So that's really cool. There is a bit of a whole transition thing here that I kind of like. And personally, I would like to keep on doing it. Gary is saying that we should PBM like the real grognards, and I think he's right. This is exactly the experience that we should have. I should set the game somewhere, and I should tell you the coordinates of the moves that I'm actually doing, which was cool, which would be great. And Alistair was watching this on LSD, so you know, it's like.
Did it make it better or worse? That's the real question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's keep that for yourself, Alistair. That would just make me sad. But yeah, it was great to have all of you in the chat. We had a great time. We'll keep you posted on when episode 3 will come. Hopefully,
yeah.
We should try to do a bit of gameplays because I think it would be interesting to play some of those games.
Yes.
And then probably look into volume 3 of the General. But yeah, that was Liz from Beyond Solitaire and myself, Fred from Homo Ludens, for this episode 2 of Wargame Archaeology. Thanks everyone for watching and see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.